This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Yo, this is Sharmane from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
Hey y'all, welcome to Militantly Mixed, the podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your host, Sharmane, aka Mixed Girl Mane. And if you listened last week, you heard my confessions of failure in that I had 3 planned episodes for the month of February for Black History Month that didn't record or failed to record. So I'm in scramble mode trying to fix that so that I can kind of stay on target. I don't know, whatever. So I have an unexpected free day because Blurred Vision and I recorded a day early. So I got an opportunity to post on Facebook to see if anybody would be down to just do an extra recording session with me this week. And someone I've kind of known for 27 years, maybe 26 years. We haven't seen each other in 25 years, probably 24 years, but we went to high school together. This is somebody that I know as Colson, Anthony Colson. Are you still the
Don't start that.
I can't
Stop
do it? Okay, I won't. It's impressive, but okay. It's okay.
You can. It's all good. It's all good. Just,
Okay.
Go ahead. Say what you're going to say.
So in high school, you were like the most medaled. Is that the way it is? I don't know sports. You were like the most fucking fastest first place winner medaled track star that we had, but actually in all of California, right?
My senior year, yes, I was the state champion. Yeah.
State champion. There you go. See, I don't know sports. I'm stupid. I know boxing. We could talk about boxing. I can't talk about anything else.
We can do.
But yeah, so like, and you and I actually have a lot in common, which is weird that we didn't really become friends or friendly until well after high school and having never seen each other since then. But we share a lot of childhood friends. And why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? You'll introduce yourself better than I will. And then we'll get into the topic that I want to talk to you about today.
I mean, well, damn, I feel like you kind of did it already, but yeah.
That was the weakest introduction ever. You just calm down and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, that's how you know me, you know what I mean? So me and Miss Mixed Girl Mane, we went to high school together. We knew each other tangentially, mainly through who would become her husband, although at the time I had no idea.
Just friends. Friends.
Yeah. Yeah, I was, kind of singularly focused on my athletic pursuits at the time. So to pay off on the little lead that Sharmane gave y'all, I was a state champion and D1 athletic scholarship holder and all that other jazz. And that was like a million years ago. So long ago, it doesn't even feel like.
Yeah, but don't you still, isn't there a record that still no one has beat that you hold? I could have swore there was one.
There's a couple, actually.
See, that's what I'm talking. I don't talk about it. I think we don't. I think this whole be humble thing is a problem because we need to show how great we are out in the world. People don't give us the credit that we deserve. So talk about your little records. I said little.
Exactly. As you hit me with the diminutive. All right, I see you.
Talk about your big old record. You've held this record for over 20 years. That is impressive. So, come on.
Well, I mean, here's the funny thing. So the person I took the record from is my uncle.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You did tell me that. That's funny.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a family thing.
Does Uncle hate it?
No, he's happy about it. But here's the thing. So when I graduated high school, I was the 3rd best in the nation. Now we all have done the same event. My uncle, my big sister, and I. We all did the same event in track and field.
Oh yeah, your sister holds records too, doesn't she?
So when they both graduated, they were the first in the nation.
Nice.
So I'm kind of the black sheep. I'm like I'm the underachiever.
That's some amazing family genetics, though, that you guys.
Yeah, genetics are real, man. Genetics are real.
Yeah, it is. It's impressive. But yeah, so we kind of peripherally knew each other in high school or whatever. I know we have talked, but it's been so fucking long ago. I don't remember specifics and stuff. But we've been talking for years, though. Now we, through Facebook and all that kind of stuff. But a couple months ago or so, you hit me up with the question. Well, first this is adorable. First, you asked me permission to ask me a question.
Yo, it's the whole consent era.
I think you were trying to be aware of sort of my deal, because as long as you've known me, I've been the mixed girl or a mixed girl or mixed girl mate. Being mixed is a big part of everything.
You were the mixed girl. And mixed with all the things.
Yeah. So like in high school, I know we had some biracial folks and shit like that. Even my partner on the other show, Blur Vision, is mixed as well. But like, no one was known for being mixed, and I was known for being mixed because I was, a panda, black, white, and Asian. And
you were militant about it.
And I would, like, even then, well, also, like, I had moved back to Sacramento after being in Long Beach with my dad's side of the family. It was 1993 when I moved back. That was the LA riots era. That was NWA. That was, LA Raiders and stuff like that. So I had a very militant surrounding, and then I come back to Sacramento with some kids that I grew up with, like in second and third grade and stuff like that, and I'm different. Like, I was a totally different person than what they knew growing up and stuff. And so in high school, like, I didn't suffer shit. Like, our school seemed so soft to me, coming from where I came from, that I was like the only person in school that wore sunglasses. I wore black all the time. I don't know who the fuck I thought I was. And I was really standoffish too, because I was dealing with some damage. So, but yeah, I was militant about mixedness, and I was militant about people seeing my blackness, which any of us that sort of had a militant leaning, I think, tended to gravitate towards each other. And that's more than likely the interactions that you and I had, maybe.
More than likely. We've spoken about this briefly, but, my mother was a Black Panther. We are from Chicago. I moved to the high school that, we know each other from. I think I went to Center Junior High, and I got there halfway through junior high. So I think I moved there when I was in 8th grade.
Military?
No.
Oh, really?
No. My uncle, actually my grandfather, started a business. He started basically a mechanic shop, and my dad was a master mechanic and a accountant, a bookkeeper. So he moved us out there on the thoughts that my dad would do the books and help him with the mechanics. So that's why we got out to Sacramento.
I see. All right. So actually, going back to the topic of today, is that you had hit me up a couple months ago and you asked me permission to ask a question, probably due to your awareness of sensitivity towards my mixedness. You didn't want to overstep, I think, was the whole point of asking if it was cool to talk about it. And you said that you had basically recently or somewhat recently discovered that you actually have a more mixed heritage than you ever was aware of. And was it a conversation with your sister that triggered it? Where you're kind of wondering if it was okay to claim mix or to even investigate mixedness when you grew up feeling black your whole life? Is that kind of accurate? Yeah,
that is accurate. This realization actually happened, like several years ago, but it's, been something that I've been, I don't know, I guess sort of struggling with. There's a weird, I can talk about this with you because you will get it, but there's a weird thing when you are black and not quite what folks expect you to be, that people always go, oh, you must be mixed with something. So I got, are you part Filipino? I later on in life became fluent in Spanish for 100 different reasons. So
girls.
Yeah. Okay, maybe the one reason, but I'm saying.
Sorry, go
ahead. You got me. All right. So, if I am speaking Spanish with someone, they'll say, "Oh, are you, Puerto Puerto Rican or Brazilian or whatnot. And so I have often gotten the question if I am mixed, and I have always vociferously said no. Like, I'm 100% black. I'm just a regular old Negro. And, surprise, surprise. Yeah. I later on find out that I am indeed mixed. My mother is, mostly non-black, which was something that we sort of knew peripherally.
Mm-hmm.
We knew my mother had Native American ancestry, and we sort of joked about her Scottish ancestry.
Mm-hmm.
But like in the black community, and you'll get this, like everybody is supposedly, in particular, when you talk about like Native American, everybody got Indian in their family.
Right.
Quote unquote. You know what I mean? So
and everybody has the auntie or the cousin that had that beautiful long straight hair that nobody else in the family had. Yeah, yeah.
Right. So as opposed to just realizing that that's a Hawaiian silky weave, you lead yourself to believe that that's actually her hair. And so that's the way that I'd always viewed these claims. But like actually looking into it, like I came to realize my grandfather was a Choctaw Native American. And not only was he a Choctaw Native American, but he, this is a little complicated. So his mother was born a slave. She was the product of slave rape. Her father was Scottish. Her slave. I was going to say technically, but ain't no technicality involved in this.
It's our history.
He was her slave master. So she was half African and half Scottish. And then she married her husband, whom was a full-blood Choctaw Native American. And that is where my grandfather came from. So mom is mostly not black. And it would explain why so many of my, she's one of 12. So
damn. Oh my gosh.
I got a big family. She's one of 12. My dad's one of 9. There's literally not one state, United States, that I can't go to and call on somebody and be like, yo, it's your big cousin Anthony.
Wow. So do you know how many first cousins you have? Do you have an idea?
I have no idea. Honestly, I have no idea. I have a lot. I got a big family. And so like that was something that I, came to realize after doing some, genealogy research. And I just thought, well, damn, this is a whole new, I don't know the word that I'm looking for, but this is a whole new, a whole new identity and a whole new heritage that I've not appropriately looked into. I've not been raised in, all these. And so, then you start looking back, like all these times that people said, oh, you're mixed with this, or you must be mixed, or whatever, which I had always brushed off as honestly, like ham-fisted attempts to compliment me. You must not be all the way black because I like you, or you seem intelligent, or you seem attractive to me, so you can't be like. Right. I always took that as sort of an insult.
And even blackness has that complicated thing of, the mixed babies being the beautiful babies and things like that. And, the erasure of who we really are type of thing happens a lot. So I could see how that could either be viewed as a positive or a negative, depending on how it makes you feel when someone says it.
Absolutely. And I had always viewed it as a negative. Again, my mother was a Black Panther. That was one of the things she was happy to tell me. So yeah. I was.
And you couldn't be a Black Panther and not be black as fuck.
Exactly. So I was, militantly black. And I always consider myself, again, black as fuck. And so any suggestion of the opposite was a bit of an insult, which honestly, it's funny. I'm going to bring up one of our old high school mates. I had a very good friend in high school. You probably know who I'm talking about. And
he was also really close to Tree too.
Yes. No. Yeah. We all played football together. We all played the sports. So we were all pretty close, and got that a lot. Very light skinned, little freckle faced, red haired.
He may not know this, but he has come up on this show a few times because I always describe the dude in high school, the redheaded, light skinned dude in high school.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I brought him up. I've never said his name, and I'll bleep him for here. But yeah, he does not know, or I assume. But yeah, he's been brought up several times.
Okay. Well, that was pretty much my best friend, and he often got the "Are you mixed?" And again, he is not mixed. Black mother, black father. You grew up in certain people's households, like I grew up in his.
But his auntie looks like him, right? Like, isn't his mother's sister the one he looks the most like, right?
No, he looks most like his. I want to say his paternal grandfather, who has red hair and freckles. But as far as I understand and remember, is not white either. So, and funny thing, he has a brother from the same mother and father who looks nothing at all like
dark
him.
Skin.
Dark skin.
I remember.
And then he has a little brother who looks almost exactly like him.
Oh, really? I didn't know there was another one.
Yeah. So it's just it's kind of the thing that happens, and genetics are weird and traits skip around and whatnot, and so you just never know. But he got that question. Where I was going with this is he got that question a lot as well,
right?
And was as far
you
as
could never tell him he was mixed. No.
Oh no. You might get a fat lip. You don't do that.
Right. Yeah.
So it's this very, just from like a holistic perspective, it's a weird thing in the Black community where you never really know.
Yeah.
Because your traits could be coming from anywhere.
Yeah.
It could be slave rape, but there are also light-skinned, blue-eyed Africans. You just don't know. And so, for folks like us who have been divorced from our histories and our genealogies and don't really know where we come from for obvious reasons, that is something that sort of looms large for us.
Yeah, I always talk about it as sort of feeling like an orphan of Africa, orphan from our history, because we don't have our culture, we don't have our language. And so we sit there and try to patchwork quilt it, here in the States, where it's like, oh, I'll take this pattern from Kenya and I'll put this, this dress from Ethiopia, and then I'll put this from Egypt. Like, people are just trying to patchwork quilt their African heritage based off of what little exposure we had, and that is our way of trying to connect back to the continent that we were taken from, and we feel terrible about it.
Well, yeah, and absolutely. I mean, it's I read this wonderful article about about one of the things that struck people most about the movie Black Panther that came out recently was how Pan-African it was. You don't realize it.
Yeah.
You're watching it from a United States perspective, but clothing was, from
specific
one part
groups.
of Africa.
Yeah.
Intellect was from different parts of Africa. Like, there were little bits and pieces of all of Africa in Black Panther. Wakanda is like the African utopia. So there's little bits and pieces of all of Africa inside of it. And that's one of the reasons why I think it resonated as a film with so many Black folks, because there was something for us to recognize.
Right.
There was a little piece of us in all of it.
It's like the fantasy that we have that there is a place in Africa that we could go and be welcomed back as, you were taken from us and now you're back, and we could have this little bubble of space that, because we don't know where all we come from. Like, some of us don't know where all we come from, and it would probably be like that. Imagine creating Wakanda for the diaspora. It would be
It would be something like that. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. No, absolutely. I think, funny, and on a side note, I didn't realize where any of my African ancestry came from until I took a genetic test and found out that it ended up in Pakistan and Malaysia.
Excuse me?
Which, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a whole nother thing. But it made no sense to me at all. They give you this little, like, you're most like this person. And then the country that came up was Malaysia. I was like, I don't think that's a country in Africa. That don't sound right.
That's funny. Side note, Blurred Comics is ranked 37 of all Apple podcasts in Malaysia.
Well, there you go. All right. Woo, woo, woo. That's shout out to my homeland.
Right?
But I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he was telling me, well, that makes perfect sense. If you spice root, that's exactly where it goes. It goes from,
Malaysia,
India, around the Horn of Africa, and that's where you're at. So one thing that I don't know if you guys have talked about this before, but one thing that they caution you about when you are a Black person taking a genetic test is they caution you. They say because if you're a man, you can check your mother's line and your father's line, the X line and the Y line, XY. Right. So your X line usually ends up in Africa, particularly West Africa. Mm-hmm. That's your mother's line. Your Y line for a lot of Black folks ends up somewhere in Europe. And so they caution you. They say, hey, this is a thing that's going to happen. They don't go into the whole like, yo, slavery was a real thing. Wake up. Right. They don't tell you that.
Like, but don't be disappointed.
Yes, but that's where it comes from. And so I was fully anticipating my Y line to end up somewhere in like Germany or Scotland. I'd known that we Scottish ancestry, and to my surprise, it ended up in Malaysia.
Well, and then so now that pieces together a little bit, like if people do, I get Filipino a lot too. People think I'm Filipino because I'm like inexplicably Asian, and you have that kind of, you have eyes that your eye shape is more almond, I think, than round.
Yeah.
So, so like I could see if someone is digging really hard to try to find a mixed heritage in your face, they would probably go with the fact that you do have, a more almond shaped eye, not a properly Asian eye, but, almond.
Perhaps. So, I always made the joke that it was like, okay, so, slave rape was a real thing. And apparently that didn't happen in my family line. So apparently we were free Negroes. We never suffered slavery, or we're just ugly. So nobody wanted to rape us.
Come on now.
I know that's terrible, but I mean, it is what it is.
I mean, we make jokes to get through our pain.
There you go.
So what triggered so I was always cautious of doing the ancestry tests because, I felt like, they're basically just going to say somewhere between 20 and 25% of me was going to end up in Africa some kind of way or whatever, me not knowing how much slave rape there was and everything like that. And I finally did it because I did the African ancestry before I did regular ancestry, or ancestry.com, whatever you want to call it. And so like that, I had to be, my father is Black or was Black. So that's why I had to go through the Y line, which means I couldn't take the test, which means I had to get a male relative to take the test. And so an uncle of mine did it for me. I paid, and had the tube shipped to him. He spit in it, blah, blah, blah. So like in our case, I was surprised to find out that we weren't even West African, we were Central African. And then on top of it, we come from a country that wasn't even in the slave trade until the last decade of the slave trade. So I'm thinking, we could have been here 400 years, but we were actually here probably like 170 years back. And then when I did the ancestry one, they were just kind of all over the map. They were just like somewhere in Kenya, somewhere in South Africa, somewhere in Nigeria, like it was just kind of all over the place. And that's because of the Bantu line. So when you're talking about migration or whatever, it would make sense that ancestry would come up with this migration pattern that goes from Kenya all the way down and back up. I didn't even think about it as the spice trade, but I guess that would make sense too. But I was surprised to find out how Black I still was. Like I was afraid, I was terrified I was going to come back with like 9% and that it was going to fuck my whole identity because, I've lived my life. I mean, and even your vague memories of me in high school is I'm a militantly Black mixed person. Right now, I do think of myself as more militantly mixed in a broad sense, but I've always been Black first. Like that's just been my identity. That's been my upbringing and everything. So in your case, when you get to the point of, what triggers you guys doing the test? Was it just like, did a story slip out and you wanted to investigate it? Or was it just, the cachet of it?
Well, for me, it was sort of a humbug. We had talked about being, having Indian in our family. And, I sort of tangentially knew that my, I think it's such a weird thing. I just have to say this. I mean, I think a lot of Black families just don't talk about the past. I think people don't.
Yeah.
If you think about slavery, you think about it as like the bad old days. And that was so long ago. But my great-grandmother was born a slave.
Yeah.
That's not so long ago.
Not too many generations.
That's not so long ago.
For me, it was 4 generations back. My great-grandmother, who was still alive when I was in high school, was the very first person born outside of slavery.
Yeah, no, I met my great-grandmother. Now, admittedly, we live she was 102 when I met her, so
Damn.
we live a long time. That being said, like, again, not that long ago, and so I think there's this kind of what you want to call a cognitive dissonance when it comes to like our slave ancestry, our slave history, where we just sort of don't think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So my family like didn't talk about our ancestry, but funny enough, one of the things I remember about you the most is how much you reminded me of my aunt. You look almost like my aunt.
You said that, and that's it's funny. It's not an uncommon thing for Black folks to say to me that I look like a cousin or an aunt or somebody in their family.
Right? Yeah. No. You really do. Like, I can show you pictures, and you'd be like, I mean, she's about almost a foot taller than you, because I remember you're short.
Yeah,
and she's tall, but
that's where the Asian kicked in. Of all the places that the Asian kicked in, is the height and the calves.
Okay, well, one of those are both good things. You good? It's a good thing. But so I had always, but again, part of the Black experience is this like weird halfway place between this thing that we know that is Africa and this thing that we don't know, which is to be American.
Right.
So part of being Black is like occupying this halfway space, this limbo.
Mm-hmm.
So, the fact that a lot of my family members are light skinned and look weird, quote unquote, it didn't strike me as odd. But I decided to look it up mainly just because I was curious. And actually, if I recall correctly, I think my little sister brought it up to me. She was like, she wanted to do this, but similarly to you, I need a male relative to do both lines. And she was like, I'll pay for it. And I was like, no, don't worry about it. I'll pay for it. I'm curious too. And so I did it, and that took me there. And then I sort of like remember all the little like halfway conversations and jokes and throwaway comments that family members had made about this, that, or the third, and started to look into my actual heritage, started like calling family members and, grandparents and all that, and found out like, oh yeah, my grandfather was Native American on the Native American rolls. He's a member of the tribe, and on top of
So, are you able to claim, or could you get what is it called?
I could get tribal benefits, but it feels inauthentic. It feels opportunistic.
Right, and I totally get that.
I wasn't raised in that. I know nothing of. Honestly, I know nothing of my Native American culture. Nothing whatsoever. That wasn't the way I was raised. Again, my mother grew up on the south side of Chicago and was a Black Panther in the '60s, and it's all I know about my mother is she is Black as fuck. So
yeah.
I don't know anything at all, about that. And so it would feel inauthentic to me to try to claim that. But I do, I am interested in the history and the culture. I would love to reconnect with that. But to claim it now feels, again, inauthentic.
Yeah. And that is actually something that I've had to think a lot about, especially, because I've started this show and I'm exploring mixed race identity on such a heavier level than I kind of ever have before. The idea of permission comes up quite often. Do we as mixed people have permission to claim fill in the blank? And
right.
And I think Black folks, this is why I think mixed people tend to gravitate towards whatever their of colorness is because white people don't have these questions the way that any of us of color do. And in particular with Black Americans, because our history is taken from us and even including our history here on this continent, we're in some cases barred from being able to find out or contacting the plantations that our families came from, or if we do happen to descend from the slave masters, the acknowledgement of that family isn't really there for us or whatever. So mixedness, in the same way that American Blackness is this, semi-orphancy from whatever we come from. And it's unfortunate. It's not our fault that we don't get to claim it or that we don't have access to it. So of course we crave it. And I think, and that's certainly my experience is, from as young as I can remember being able to be aware of this kind of stuff from 7th grade or whatever, I'm writing letters trying to find the plantations my family members came off of based off of information my granddad gave me. Me always wanting a bridge back to Africa. But now that I have that bridge, now that I have what tribes, my 3 tribes my family came from on my father's side, do I get to say that I am of these people? I don't think so. But do I want to learn about them? And do I want to see if there's things or evidence, like genetic evidence of my connection to them? Like, I found out that one of the tribes that my father's ancestry comes from is a Pygmy tribe, the Koda, and Koda people of Gabon. And what's funny is, you know, my black side of the family, the men aren't that tall. They're not short, but they're like between 5'10", 5'9", and 5'11". So their frames are smaller than, like, you know, like Blurred Vision, who we both know. Like, they're not big like that. They're smaller framed guys.
In fairness, he's gigantic.
He is gigantic, and his whole family is just huge. But you know, like, when somebody when a white person gets a picture painted in their head of a black guy.
When you think West African, Nigerian,
you think tall, you know, broad-shouldered, stuff like that.
Yes,
so absolutely. In my case, they're smaller framed. So, like, my dad being like a $145 until his death made sense to me. Like, I'm like, oh, like, all of a sudden I find this out in my DNA, and I'm like, oh, you know, they're hella small and skinny framed guys, and they look like these pictures of these people that I'm seeing. You know, even in terms of, like, facial features to a degree were kind of similar to some of the pictures I was seeing compared to the men in my dad's side of the family. And then, you know, digging a little bit further into the Koda and stuff like that. I don't know, of all the tribes, for some reason, the Koda I gravitated more towards because I also found out that they live in a polygyny environment. And me being a polyamorous person...
Oh. Ding, ding, ding.
You know, it was like, maybe it's just in my genetics. And even though, you know, polygyny is different than what I practice or whatever, just the idea that there was an openness within the community to multiple partners made me feel like there was something, you know, maybe there's something in my genetics that has a tell. Maybe that's my way of bridging myself back, right? And so I wonder, I think this happens with us a lot, is we are orphans from where our ancestors come from. And I would be surprised to find out that there isn't anybody whose family has been here for multiple generations that doesn't have some dose of slave owner rape and all that other kind of stuff. Like, even if they're still coming out at like 90 something percent African, but that like 10%, you know, I still kind of expect it. I would be surprised to see anybody come through on 100%, honestly, here in the States because of our history. But I think craving and investigating the cultures and the heritages that we come from is 100% still okay. The question is, do we walk away repping for them really hard? That's the difference thing. Like, I feel that it's okay for me to claim Japan because my grandmother's Japanese and she raised me. To a degree, I feel that it's okay to claim England because my British grandmother is from there and she also was a big part of raising me in the beginning. So I don't claim my white American heritage very well because I don't know that side. I know that I knew my grandfather for like 5 times. I've seen him 5 times in my life, and then he was gone, and that's it. I have no connection to him and his culture. And yet I've found out through ancestry how long his people were here predate the United States formation and stuff like that. And there's very specific things in his DNA strand that mark him in different, like his ancestry in different parts of the country before the Revolutionary War and everything like that. So there's things that make it interesting for me and I want to gravitate towards, but I don't want to try to sit there and be like, you know, I'm Irish or I'm German because I don't know those people. And the people who were alive when I was born didn't know those people. So it's tough.
You know, on that note, I met my great grandmother several times. You know, she lived in San Jose. So we would, you know, when we moved out here, we would go there once in a while and go see her. You know, go see Big Mama. So I met her, and one of the funniest things not funny but odd, I guess I should say, that I remember is I always remember her referring to her father, her slave master, whatever. God, that's fucked up. As
that hurts to say.
A little bit. She always referred to him as that man, Mr. Perryman. That was his name, Mr. Perryman.
Fuck, like Mr.
Yeah, like Mr. from The Color Purple. Like, there was no familial tie there. It was just like he was that man to her, which always struck me as odd. And even though I knew that and had heard her say that and had known, you know, that obviously if he was her slave master, he wasn't black. For some kind of odd reason, like the idea that this, family member of mine who was the, matriarch of my, mother's line, it's odd. I guess maybe I felt like the filter of the blackness of Chicago washed all that out of me, but I never really ever even considered the idea that I was mixed. I think by the time I got to high school, me and my older sister and I, we had joked about my mother being mixed, but none of us had ever owned that.
That's funny. I think that's actually probably common. Once you're removed from the generation that did the mixing, it's easy to kind of make that claim.
Right. And again, all I ever knew was that, again, we were from Chicago. My mom was a Black Panther. We had all the African iconography, the masks, the shields, the swords, all that other jazz. We had all that hung up in the house. I knew that I was black as fuck, and that's all I knew. And it was until I was a grown man, until I actually investigated my background, my lineage, that I realized, like, oh gosh, like this is a thing that I am that I don't even feel comfortable claiming, because all those, what I would consider at this point, sort of backhanded compliments about, oh, you must be mixed, which I always thought of as, well, you're too smart to be all black, or I like you, so you can't be black, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now there's merit to those comments, and there isn't. That's the way I feel.
I'm gonna say there's not. I'm gonna say that what's going on is different. I think when people are trying to find a way to justify accepting you by de-blackifying you,
yes,
that like even my mixed ass doesn't fly for me. Like, as much as I'm proud and enjoy and love being mixed, what I hate is when somebody takes me as somewhat better than my full black brothers and sisters type of thing. Like, I'm not okay with that. And so I would say that those, as much as I hate to say it, I would say that those incidences that you're talking about, like, your call on that is right. And you shouldn't have accepted it, and you should continue to fight as you get those. But in terms of heritage, finding out that there's something else going on, there really is more just this is a tough thing. This is why I specifically want to talk to black folks or mixed black folks about this subject, or people that can identify as mixed black on this subject, because it's really complicated. Like right now, I can have pride in being both Japanese and British, because those generations were voluntary. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what it feels like. On my black side, my granddad was dark as fuck, and his father was dark as fuck. But my great grandmother, who I knew before she died, when I was still a teenager, the firstborn post slavery, she could not in the 90s pass for white, but in the 1890s, she could have passed for white, because they weren't used to mix with, as much. And her last name was also Whiteside, which was the name of the plantation that her family came off of, the Black Whiteside, from the house, from the master, whatever. So, like, what I don't know is if her direct father was the slave master, or if her mother was the product of the slave master. That's the part that I don't know. But I know that's what their situation was. And in her case, her being black as fuck makes sense to me. She cannot claim or doesn't desire or feel investigative or have pride in the rape side of her genetics. And I'm 100% okay with that. So, like, if that were to pop up in my genetics, if we found out that it was specific to her line and it was whatever race or ethnicity, I wouldn't investigate that as part of me either, even though biologically it is. But, like, learning about my British ancestry specific to my Nana, yes, because I knew that woman and she married my black grandfather, and so that was voluntary mixing. So I would say in your case, it's probably, like, I understand your mother in that, and the decision to not investigate it, maybe not even to talk about it, or even to have a sense of shame. I fully feel like I would understand your mother, and I would probably, in her position, have done the exact same thing.
Yeah, I totally get where she came from in that regard, and I also understand now, in a way that I didn't before, her very sharp turn into all things Black.
Right.
As just again, you think about and one thing I don't often talk about is my mother is wicked smart. Skipped 2 grades. Got bussed up from Chicago public schools into private Catholic schools because she was so intelligent. And so that was a largely white environment for her in Black as fuck Chicago.
I wonder if that played into her wanting to be focused on being Black as fuck too, just having that kind of upbringing.
I think it had to. I can't see any way that it didn't. And and oddly enough, I see that mirrored in my own experience as, nerdy. I existed in this weird little spot. I was a nerdy Black kid. I looked like a nerdy Black kid, but I hung out with all the jocks, and I was a jock.
Yeah.
So it was a weird little space I occupied,
Actually, it's pretty impressive given the time that we were in school. Like nowadays, a blurred can get by, but when we were in high school, like I was telling Blurred Vision the other day, I was a closeted geek in high school. No one knew I was reading comics. No one knew, like at best they maybe knew I was into anime, but that was acceptable. I was Japanese, like that's a pretty impressive space for you to occupy in that time period of Blackness.
Well, it's, what do they say? Necessity is a mother of invention. Like I had no option other than to do that. It's not like I could hide the fact that I was a nerdy Black kid. I got called Urkel more times than I would like to admit.
Oh, damn.
So, like I was a
that I don't remember.
Yeah, I was a skinny Black kid with glasses. I mean, it is what it is.
I do remember the glasses. So yeah, you couldn't really kind of get by with that. But I think because you were a jock, and not only that you were a jock, but you were like an uber jock, like you could fucking beat everybody. I think that probably helped.
A little bit, probably. But all that is to say, like, I didn't really have the option to hide. So I had to kind of just lean into who I was. And admittedly, it's not just that I looked like a nerd. I was a nerd. Like, I loved anime and comic books and books and all the other, all the things that you would imagine a little Black nerd loving. That was me. That was my lane.
Did people know you were into comics? I don't know about you.
I don't think that was something that I talked about. It's funny, but I got my first comic book from my father. He gave me my first comic book. It was a Silver Surfer.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it was built into me.
You know what's funny, and maybe this is something we could talk, like, because you're supposed to come over on Blurred Comics eventually, but maybe this is something we could talk about. I know a ton of Black folks whose main or favorite character or first introduction into comics was Silver Surfer, and I have a theory that we thought he was Black the whole time. And then when that movie came out and he was voiced, that everybody was like, see? Like, I really believe that there's something there, is because we had such a desert of Blackness in comics that Silver Surfer was like an incognito.
Well, I think anytime that the protagonist, the comic book protagonist's face and or race is obscured, it allows us Black nerds to project upon him, because he's Superman and Batman and the Flash and Green Lantern, and we see all these white cats. Yeah. But you get a cat like Spider-Man where I can't quite see what he looks like, but I know that motherfucker lives in the hood. Right. I know his daddy ain't around. I know he's being raised by his.
Get the familiar symptoms of where we grew up.
Right, and I know that no matter what he does, the cops is always on him. The newspaper hates him. As hard as he tries, he just can't seem to catch a break. Well, he's seeming kind of Negro-ish in that moment.
I mean, he's straight up raised by his auntie, so.
I mean, come on, exactly.
So sad.
Come on.
Don't be a stereotype, Spider-Man.
I mean, it is what it is, yo. I mean, he's from Brooklyn. He's being raised by his adopted family, and he got problems with the police. I mean, if he's not Negro, he's definitely Negro adjacent.
There you go.
So
that's funny. So yeah, because I didn't know you were into comics until I remember you, me, and Blur Vision having a conversation over Facebook about how they were never going to give us Black Panther. So it's post, isn't it amazing?
That's how long ago that was, yeah.
Right? So it's post Iron Man, at least the start of these 18 films or 19 films, whatever. It's post Iron Man, but pre-announcement. It's pre-Winter Soldier, because even by Winter Soldier, they hadn't announced this yet, right?
Right.
Yeah. So we were like, they'll never give it to us.
They made some hints. They made some hints. Once I realized Black Panther was coming out in Winter Soldier, I knew he was going to get a movie. But I was, we haven't talked about this, but like I have a pop culture podcast that I participate in pretty heavily. Mm-hmm. And we had been talking about the potential for Black Panther years before it came out. And it had always been a wish upon a star kind of thing.
Right.
We never imagined that they would ever actually do this. And I actually read Black Panther comics.
Yeah,
of course,
me too.
If there was a Black Panther, I see some Black Panther shit, I'm going to get on it.
Right.
And I honestly never in a million years thought I would ever see that character on the big screen.
I'm telling you.
On TV. Like, I didn't think anybody would ever talk about this. And lo and behold, Mickey Mouse makes a movie about Black Panther.
Right? Like,
incredible.
I remember us having that conversation where we're just like, they're never going to give it to us. But if they do, right now, Blood Pact, we're going to have to see it together. And then they announced it and we were like, what? It's happening. Oh my gosh. And we still failed to meet the
pact was not fulfilled.
The pact was not fulfilled. So Black Panther 2, you're gonna have to make your way down here or something so we can make that happen, at least. But that was basically, I think, how I figured out. Or you had posted something that was like a comic foot cutout or something, and it was like Black Panther and Storm or whatever, and it was like, oh, you're one of us, okay. Because
it more than likely was Black Panther and Storm, because I was all in my fifis about the relationship between Black Panther and Storm.
Right. Yeah.
Really got his start. So.
Yeah. So it's I think that's. I'm glad that I'm not only glad that they gave it to us, but that they allowed Black people to control it and tell the story for the primary, for the most part, through their own cultures and experiences and stuff like that. And so now we live in a post Black Panther world, and it's $1 billion world. It's amazing. I didn't realize your podcast was that old, that it's been going on for that long.
7 years.
Damn, I did not know that.
7 years.
Well, why don't you, let's see, what's the time? Yeah, why don't we get there then, because we're almost to an hour. Why don't you talk about your show? Just tell us how to find it and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, well, the show is Get Out the Room. It originally started as a strictly Black horror movie podcast, and we say that, but there's always been at least one or two white dudes involved. Because
I was gonna say, because when I first started listening to it, it was primarily a white dude's voices, and then all of a sudden you came on, and I was like, okay.
No, Damon. Okay, so Damon and I are both. We both work in the white spaces. So we have our incognito voices and personas pretty solid. So he may sound white, but he's not.
Excuse me.
But typically in the beginning, it was me, Damon, and Ryan. So Ryan is Black, Damon is Black, I'm Black. Then we brought in Scott and Carl, and I don't think we've ever had Scott and Carl on at the same time.
I think Scott was on the episode that I listened to, because I feel like there was definitely a Scott.
Yeah, no, yes, and Scott is uber white, like Scott's white. Carl is everything you would think a white dude is, despite the fact that he grew up in the shittiest of the Black hoods in his neighborhood, and, and all his friends, all his people, they're all Black. So Carl is one of those cats. He's Black by proxy. he's invited to the cookout. So it is a mixed group, but for the most part, it is a Black podcast. It is definitely from a Black perspective.
Okay.
We approach everything from that perspective, and we started off as horror, and then we branched out into popular culture. In particular, when the Iron Man / Marvel movies started to happen, because we are all comic book nerds,
right?
So felt like, well, we have to talk about this because this is our thing.
Yeah.
And obviously enough, Carl, white dude, was the one who was most excited about Black Panther. We told him from the beginning, it's never going to happen, dude. Just like let it go. Like, we're not going to get a Black Panther.
Oh, he had that white hope that it was going to happen.
And white hope, much like white tears, are very powerful.
I guess.
And he made it happen. He made it happen. So,
he willed it. Thanks, Carl.
For real. Shout out to Carl.
That's amazing. Do you guys have a social media thing? Do you have Twitter, Instagram, and all that kind of stuff? People can follow the shows.
Well, I mean, honestly, you can just put "Get Out the Room" in Google. Will pop up. But that being said, you can get us on Twitter. Get Out the Room. We got a Facebook fan page. Again, Get Out the Room. You can get us on
consistency.
Yeah. You got to keep it. You got to coordinate. But and again, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast, Podomatic, and it's all Get Out the Room. And do not let my rather demure behavior on this podcast fool you. We get mad ratchet, and I'm mainly the ratchet one. So if you want to hear a more ratchet side of me, you can definitely find it on Get Out the Room. And Maney just laughed, so because I know she's listening, she knows. So
it's funny too, because someone pointed out, someone who knows both shows for Blurred Comics and Militantly Mixed said, you are two different people on these shows. And I'm like, I'm not really. It's just that Blurred Comics is more like my everyday Mane. I'm a pro-Black mixed girl comic book geek. So like that's where I'm like more like my normal self. And Militantly Mixed changed me in a weird way, because in the beginning it was this selfish journey for me to like connect with other mixed people and like talk about mixedness. And then I was so like touched and stuff by all the people that are willing to share their stories, and like the heaviness of a lot of their stories has like melted my ice heart or whatever. And so like I'm usually a lot more positive or I think I sound grateful on the show, because I'm grateful that people are sharing their stories, and that because sometimes it's intense and heavy, and sometimes it's like the first time they've gotten to talk about mixedness with somebody, and it feels like a big deal for them, and by extension me. And so both shows are very representative of who I am. I just don't typically like to show people the softer side of Mane. And unfortunately for my, like hard candy shell, Militantly Mixed has softened me publicly. Whereas Blurred Comics, I get to be my normal, mean, funny, ratchet self. And, like Blurred Vision has known me since I was little. So he's never surprised that I'm hard. Whereas
nor would I be. So yeah. I get it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, but yeah, I've been accused of being kind of like way tame on this show. Every now and then someone else will get a little bit of the ratchetness out of me, but primarily it's, there's a lot of gratefulness in this side of this side of ManeHustle, the Militantly Mixed side, which is so funny because the title is Militantly Mixed. And I'm like, oh, thank you. But like, I know, like even you, I mean, it's not something, this particular topic hasn't been something that you've talked about quite a lot or whatever. And so I do appreciate that. Because I kind of sprung it on you too. I was like, hey, this is what I want to talk about. So I appreciate that you came on to have that conversation with me. That being said, we have been planning for months. You were supposed to come on to Blurred Comics with me and Blurred Vision so that we could review the X-Men animated series first 2 episodes. Have you watched them recently?
Oh, I've seen them God knows how many times.
Okay.
And yeah, like I'm always ready. I stay ready.
All right. So we need to plan that. Well, yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I do appreciate it. Especially since it was kind of last minute out of nowhere.
You're silly. I remember you as being just inherently unbothered. That is the way I would put it. You were inherently unbothered.
That's a hilarious way to view me. I mean, yeah, I really, that's yeah, that works. Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle Media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Sharmane Johnson. Music is by David Bogan, The One. And if you like what you heard on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes and wherever you find your podcasts. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.